Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Sean, and I'm delighted you're joining us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Michael Roth, MVP, who will cover the power of governance, enabling adoption in a low-code world. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar more on X. Our handle is at ESPC_community, and our hashtag is hashtag ESPC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't let the learning stop here. Check out our Learning Hub, which is updated with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking the Content tab at the top. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining for our next webinar, Intelligent Apps, the Future of Power Apps, with Vivian Voss, MVP. This webinar will take place Tuesday, 28th of January, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. CET. For more information on this webinar, please check out www.sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Elevate your Microsoft Power Platform skills at the European Power Platform Conference in Austria on the 16th to 19th of June 2025. Power Platform Week attendees get €150 off tickets with code Power Platform Week, valid until February 7th. Learn the latest in Power Apps, Power Automate, and Dynamics 365 while connecting with experts and peers. Scan the QR code or register now and visit www.sharepointeurope.com/European Power Platform Conference. Don't miss our 2-for-1 sale for FalCon Europe, available February the 5th only. Register now to get 2 participants for the price of 1. More perspectives, more networking, and more opportunities. Act fast. This offer is for 1 day only at www.sharepointeurope.com/Falcon Europe 2-for-1 deal. As always, if you have any questions, after the webinar, we'll have a questions and answers session. Type any questions you might have into the questions box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now, I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenter, Michael. Hello, Michael. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello. Good morning, or good day, or good evening. Thank you for having me. And now I have to share my screen again, right? And it's, I guess, it's this one. So give me a quick okay if you see the screen.
Yeah, I can see the screen perfectly.
Awesome. Good. Yeah, I already said good morning. I just want to say if I may not seem to look into the camera's over here. You guys are over there, and the presentation is over there. So lots of monitors, lots of confusement or possibilities to get myself confused. Yeah, that's why I'm not always looking directly into the camera speaking to you, but believe me, I'm here with you. So welcome to Power Platform, the power of governance, one of my sessions where I talk about enabling adoption in a low-code world. Basically, what we are going to do, first of all, I'm going to start the timer to remind myself to leave enough room for questions at the end. So, okay, we got this. Basically, this session is about how can governance, how can we benefit from good governance for adoption for Power Platform, for low-code, basically. Yeah, but first, before we dive into the agenda, a quick, words about me. So hi there, I'm Michael. If you haven't met me, a few key facts. I'm a father of daughters, 2 exactly, and I have 2 bonus kids by now. So in the best case, there are 4 kids jumping around in this house. So it can be a lot of stress. 2 of them are sick. They are here right now. So if we see them going on in the background, don't mind, just listen. Apart from that, I'm an outdoor guy and a board game geek. I love these outdoor or offline hobbies, outdoor board games, and I'm a Halloween enthusiast, I've realized. I'm a BizApps MVP. Sean already said that. And in my role as BizApps MVP and a consultant and solution architect, I can focus on the fun topics of governance, which I really like and enjoy. And of course, the fun topics are governance, administration, security, all this stuff. Down there, you can see my contacts in the social media. So I'm on Blue Sky, LinkedIn, and I do have my own blog as well as thepoweraddicts.com, where you can contact me if you need help with administration, governance, security, all of my most interested topics, where I can sell coachings and one-on-one sessions. If you have further questions, just contact me. But I'm not on X or Twitter anymore. I just ditched it for good last week. And I just seen that the EPPC is also on LinkedIn. Sean, you just mentioned Twitter or X, but I've seen you on LinkedIn as well. All right. So what will today be about? I have the power of governance. I have called this after my last meeting with a customer. I've called this, it's an epos in 4 acts, basically. So we already done the welcome and introduction. We have that under the belt, so this is good. And then we have 4 acts, basically. This is what I have seen to be kind of interesting when you do it like that. We have the beginning is the Wild Wild West. That is something that you have probably heard before. Microsoft itself, they call it like that. Then we have from the Wild Wild West is what I see a lot at customers, and from there we start what is governance actually, because quite often there's a misunderstanding. And from there, when we have a definition of governance for Power Platform, then we can see how we align the governance. And I don't know if you align it or if it follows automatically. If you set a good governance, then user adoption usually follows at hand. And this is what I want to show you. And in the end, you have something like governance and adoption hand in hand, like the dream scenario, so to say. But until that, we have to clear out a few things and talk about a few maybe misconceptions. So whether you are from the change management, user adoption, communications area listening here, I would show you a little bit of the technical stuff that is necessary for good user adoption, but we won't dive into the tech part here. And if you are from the tech side of Power Platform, maybe you are an administrator or something like that yourself, then I would show you what is necessary on the other side, because there are 2 sides to user adoption and to governance as well. And we will bring them together in this session here. All right. So basically, when I talk to my customers, and I think for the last 2 years now, I only work in governance and security projects for the Power Platform. So this is basically the essence of my everyday life and doing. So when I ask them, how are you set up with the Power Platform, especially for governance or administration? Is everything up to date, smooth running, user adoption okay? They describe their Power Platform setup more or less like this, like an orchestra, where business and IT go hand in hand together to change the whole IT landscape in their organization. And there are some loud instruments, and there are some quieter ones. There are heavy ones and light ones. So different participants, all engaged in the Power Platform, bringing different people from different areas together. And it all sounds very well structured and rounded up. So that sounds nice, right? But then usually we go a little bit deeper and take a look under the hood, and how it actually is more like this. And I found this picture at some point. This is a political cartoon, but that is not what it's about. I just want to show you how quite often the Power Platform setup, if you don't put effort into governance, adoption, or any of the settings, how it can look instead of a well-structured orchestra. You can see here the bow is almost piercing this drum, and the flute is destroying the harp. This guy isn't even facing the right direction. He's doing what he wants. He's minding his own business, doing his own thing. They are disturbing the trombone and the violin over there. They don't work that well together. And the sheet music, I think no one of these guys can actually see the sheet music. So it's actually chaos. Everyone does as they please. Some things can even be dangerous, like we can see here with the instruments getting destroyed. It's not really harmonious. And that is often the situation that is described as Wild Wild West, where you don't have a governance concept, you don't have specific rules, you don't have a common goal, maybe. And that is more or less always the case when I talk to my customers who haven't put any thoughts or effort into a governance approach or into a user adoption campaign by that. But if we stay a little bit with the image of an orchestra, okay, this is designed to be a live session where we actually see each other. So I would actually ask the question: does any one of you have an idea what every good orchestra needs in order to perform well? Maybe I don't need to hear the answer from you. Maybe just think about it. What does every good orchestra need? And they're basically in the basement. There are two things that they need. So every orchestra needs a common understanding of what they are doing. And then I don't mean play music, but a little bit more specific, like a common understanding, like they need a sheet music. They need to play the same thing, the same song, basically. That is absolutely important. Otherwise, everyone just plays what they want to. But there's more, because every orchestra also needs some kinds of guidance and alignment. And that doesn't come from paper. That comes from people. So we have a conductor. That are the two things that every orchestra needs in order to perform good. And with these two parts, we can tackle basically two challenges that every organization has that is using the Power Platform. The first one is the Wild Wild West chaos. I often call it the unmanaged chaos, where you can see the Power Platform naturally by default doesn't come with any governance. You have options, yes, but if you don't set them, you don't have any governance at all. And that leads to a wide spread of applications, data sprawl, uncontrolled creation. Everyone is doing what they want, what they need. Everything is unplanned and ad hoc. And that quite often leads to frustrated users or frustrated business decision makers, or even worse, those frustrated C-level management, because they usually invest money in order to put the development of low-code development in line and orchestrate and get a business value, a benefit, a return of investment, basically. But that doesn't happen if you have unmanaged chaos, if you have that challenge. And that's basically like an orchestra, and everyone plays what they and how they like. That is the first thing that we need to tackle as a challenge. The other one is something that I call the simplicity trap. And that's usually the point in my session where I ask if somebody from Microsoft is in the audience. Now I can't see that, so we see what happens. So what often happens and what I see is the message that I see is Power Platform is low code and it is so easy that everyone can do it. If you know Excel functions, you can develop a Power App. And I don't know how you think about that, but I don't think that's really true. I don't come from an IT background originally. I'm from the educational science, and I knew how to write Excel functions, and it took me a while until I learned how to develop a Power App. So quite often customers are more or less lured into the idea that it's super easy and super quick to develop a Power App and everyone can do that. It's easier than learning a programming language, yes, but it's not super easy and like done in a couple of minutes. And from the simplicity trap, from the idea that it's super easy, everyone can do it, what often happens is that most of my customers don't put too much effort into it because it's easy. Why bother? So, and that leads to that that leads to the fact that they don't have a common strategy. They don't have terms of usage for the user or unclear terms of usage. They don't offer any training because it's easy, and everyone tries on their own. That is like an orchestra, and each musician is trying to figure out how to play the song on their own. they're just trying. Some of them will start over when they make a mistake or something, and some just play through. And this is something that I see quite often, those two challenges. And both of them can be tackled if we have the idea of a good governance approach that leads to good user adoption, when we keep that in mind. All right. This is a quote that I have collected with the consent of the owner from one of my customers. So we talked about what we need to do to keep our data safe, our platform safe. And he said, in order to keep our organizational data safe, we need to block users from certain functionalities and restrict functions and to prohibit possibilities. That is what governance means to most of my customers. So you need to block users and just take things away from me, like a bad child that you have to discipline or something like that. And if this would be an in-person event, once again, I would ask you to raise your hand if you've heard something like this before. Governance is something bad, something that blocks the user, something that takes possibilities away from you. I certainly did, and I think most of you or a lot of people have heard something similar during their work time. So that is something that I deal with almost every day. And I have a different opinion about governance. And that's why I brought a definition, and then we can see what we can do from that definition of governance. So there are, of course, lots of definitions out there. So I've gathered a few of them and just come up with one that is really well-rounded, and I found it online. And that says IT governance involves the strategic alignment of technology, tools, and infrastructure with organizational structures, leadership, and processes to support and achieve business goals. And I just realized that there is a lot to unpack in this just simple quote or in this definition around the governance for IT. So first, I start with the most obvious. It's the use of the alignment of technology, tools, and infrastructure. And that is basically the tech part. That is your tenant settings, your environments, data loss prevention policies, security roles, and basically also if you have an administrator in place, a dedicated one or not. Because what I see quite often is that people use the Power Platform, but they don't dedicate a single administrator to that task. And it's usually if you are in the wrong time, in the wrong meeting, and you don't get out fast enough, then boom, you're Power Platform administrator, and then you're like stick with it, with the whole platform, and you have to try to figure out how to organize it, how to govern it, how to make it safe. And what often happens then is that administrators like to shut down functionalities just to feel safe for themselves. That is the tech part. The tech part is a part of governance. There's no doubt about that, but there's more in that. We have also the organizational structures, leadership, and processes. And this is the organizational part. Your processes, strategies, goals, your culture, whatever that is that makes your organization unique, that needs to be considered. And if we stay in the image that we had before, the tech part is more or less the sheet music, something that you can write down and give to everyone to read. The organizational part, on the other hand, is more on the communication side. So you have to talk to people, you have to think about what are your processes. What are my strategies? What are my goals? What are we trying to achieve with Power Platform in general, basically? So that is the foundation of governance. And for me, this sentence doesn't sound too bad. Like it doesn't sound like we would like take functionalities away or we would block users. That's not what we do. But I would like to dive a little bit deeper into the tech part and the organizational part, and then we can see how they both align and how they build on each other, basically. I hope I can do that without going in too deep. Yes. So we start with the technical part. So here's our sheet music. I've listed a few of those things already. So tenant settings, environments, DLP, security roles and groups, the COE starter kit, Center of Excellence starter kit, and monitoring are a few basics and foundations from the technical side that I have in every of my projects. So just a few examples. This isn't an exclusive list, but It's just a few examples. Tenant settings. We can, for example, we have to control who can create environments. If you don't control that, everyone can do that and everyone will do that. And you will end up with 5,000 environments, which can be quite messy. And tenant isolation is another really good example that is switched off by default. You should switch that on. Like one of the first things you do if you think about user adoption or governance, basically, or security. Basic isolation prohibits other users with credentials from your account to work with your data in your tenant. So external users can use your data in your tenant if they have user credentials, like external accounts, guest accounts, consultants that you have in your company. So there is a possibility of data leakage. You have to get your tenant settings straight. For environments, you have to plan your environment strategy. How many environments do you need? If you are quite new to Power Platform and you have never thought about that, then everything is in default environment, which can be fine, but the default environment doesn't have a backup. So if you delete something by accident, it's gone for good. So just let's keep our fingers crossed that you don't delete this business critical app that some citizen developer built. So you have to think about your environment strategy. How many environments do you need? ALM, application lifecycle management, is something that is quite near. So where you have your environments for development, for testing, and for production to keep it up just safe so that you can back up your data and you don't slide into a horrible accident. So this is something that is technically that needs to be done. Then DLPs, short for data loss prevention policies. Basically lets you decide what connectors do you want to use, what connectors do you need, or example, custom connectors. If there is no connector already there, then you can build your own one, or you can connect your own data sources to the Power Platform. But can everyone develop a custom connector, or should anyone be able to develop a custom connector? Because you have to think about authentication and security, for example, and lots of citizen developers who are not familiar with the basics of programming, basically, they don't know how to set up OAuth authentication. And sometimes they make mistakes, which can be dangerous in form of data leakage. So there are a lot of things to consider. So like with security roles and groups, who can access what and how to manage that. Is everyone allowed to see everything? Usually, if you have like an HR department or something, or personal data, then not everyone should be allowed to see everything. Then we have the COE starter kit, the Center of Excellence starter kit, the perfect toolkit to start up, but it's just a bunch of apps and flows that helps you. That is really helpful to get an inside view what's going on in your tenant, so you don't have to go from environment to environment and see who has developed a new app, where is a new flow going, and something like this. So it helps with visibility. And of course, then the monitoring thing, where you should activate the audit logs and delegate responsibilities. Who is responsible for what? So this is a lot of the technical part that is the foundation of a good governance. Here we go. That is the technical part of the governance. Just a few examples. There's more to it. I could talk for 8 hours straight just about the technical parts, but we don't have the time for that yet. So, but this is just one side, as I just said before. Just the sheet of music is not enough, because everyone can read that, but really using that and understanding what that means is a different story. I have one of my favorite customers, basically. I work a lot with them. In the beginning, they had a huge governance document. It was like 120 pages document where they in detail described which environments they are, like what DLPs they have, who can access what, who is the manager of whom, and all this stuff. They laid it out in detail, and that was really impressive. And yet they had a problem because people were developing apps in the wrong environments, and they would ask questions over and over again. So it wasn't really going that well, yet they had a detailed governance approach. And at some point I asked them, okay, you have this really detailed governance instruction manual, basically, but how do you tell your users and your citizen developer what's inside? Like, how do you tell them? And they're like, why should we? We have it here on SharePoint and they can download it. but none of the users or citizen developer actually knew that it was there. So if you do good things, talk about it. That's an important part. And that is also now we coming to the second part of the governance and user adoption point. And that is the non-technical part, the other side of the medal. And for that, I would like to go back to the quote that I brought earlier. Like, in order to keep our organizational data safe, we need to block users from certain functionalities, restrict functions, and prohibit possibilities. I still say that's not true for me, because maybe you've seen that from a few of the technical parts. I try to give guidance, but I come back to that later. So that is the conductor part. Yep, sheet music is done. Now I said this is not true for me, and I want to get a specific part from the definition to explain a little bit of that. And that is the part to support and achieve business goals. And I've added we use tech in order to make this piece make sense. So we use tech to support and achieve business goals. That is one of the definition of governance, basically. And that means that governance has a dedicated purpose. And the purpose is not block users, restrict functionalities, but it's basically we engineer the tech in order to enable the organizational parts. We use tech to help us. So we install guidelines to help us live our work culture, how we in our individual organization and company, how we tick, how we work. We need guidelines to explain everyone how we work, and we want to engineer the tech in order to enable all of that. And also, we install guardrails to help us reach our strategic goals, because that's what we do with the governance. In the end, we want to achieve our business goals. And when we install guardrails, so no one steps beyond, so no one falls or no one makes a mistake. Well, they can make mistakes. So no one accidentally deletes that business critical app from default environment where we don't get it back. For that, we install guardrails. So whatever we do with governance, we do that to achieve our goals. So put it up there. And especially the guidelines and the guardrails. I have a few things for that. Because guidelines and guardrails, if you build them, if you use them, and if you communicate them to your users, they have something. They build trust and a feeling of security. If I give you an environment and say, feel free to experiment, click around, do whatever you like, you can't break it. Then you can do whatever you like, because I made it so, and I built it in a way that you can't break things, but you can do whatever you like. Just go ahead and have fun. Users who feel safe are free to experiment, to learn, and to thrive. And users who don't feel safe, they fear of clicking that button. They don't want to include that element or something like that. It's really difficult to really learn and comprehend the topic if you don't feel safe in an environment, in a technical setup. So those guidelines and those guardrails we get from the technical part of the governance really helps the user. And the other part, the engineering the tech in order to enable the organizational parts, is basically when we don't work to police the technical process, tech is supporting our work, thus creating sense and meaning. So quite often I see processes where people and users, they are like going through that process just because they have to, just because it's always been like that. We've always done it like that. And then it feels like the tech is not supporting us, but we are supporting the tech or the process. But actually, we need to think about how we can use tech to support what we do, to support us reaching our strategic goals, our business goals, to create value, and not the other way around. And if we do that, ultimately, we rediscover that sense and meaning in our work. And just following this process, because we've always done it like this, doesn't really create sense and meaning. And that is the point where the technical part of governance through guidelines and guardrails helps us adopt or create a feeling of sense, meaning, and where we feel safe to experiment, to learn, to thrive. And from there, we go to the other side of the medal, the other part of the governance, the organizational part, the process, the training, the support, responsibility, community, and communication. And this is something that is quite often overlooked almost all the time. And this is, at least when I talk to people, I usually talk to the IT people, to the tech people. And for them, it's really hard. Example, processes. Every organization has their dedicated processes, like a housekeeping process, an onboarding process, like ordering. How do I order a license? How do I order, I don't know what, a new device or whatever. Every process, every organization has their processes, and you need to know these processes in order that the Power Platform, for example, or any other piece of tech for that matter, can help you and support you in your processes. You don't build an application that you just feed that doesn't fit the process. And if you talk to, let's say, hardcore developers who are just who don't talk to people, but they are just talking to their machine, to their laptop, sometimes for them it's hard to know all the processes. I mean, why should I know the housekeeping or onboarding HR process when I don't work in HR? But this is absolutely crucial to come up with a user adoption and with a business value for Power Platform. We want the tech to support our processes, and our processes are usually pretty unique. Same thing with training. Microsoft says it's easy, everyone can do it, but it needs to be learned properly. It can be tricky, especially Canvas apps, where you can write your code. Or if you don't come from a relational data source background, basically, then Dataverse can be hard and tricky. So training is absolutely necessary. Support. I see that over and over again. What happens if an app breaks? If something doesn't work anymore? Do you have a first level, second, and third level support? Many organizations don't think about support because, well, it's easy. It's low code. Aren't there examples on the internet that you can look up? But that doesn't feel right. If I am a user and I'm stuck or something is broke, and my administrator or my IT department just say, "We just look it up on the internet," and then I thank you for nothing. That doesn't help. So this is absolutely crucial. This is part of the guardrails or the guidelines. Responsibility is a really interesting point. Who hosts and runs applications? Citizen developer or local IT? I just had this case with a customer, and one of the citizen developers had a great idea to support their process, and they developed an application, two citizen developer, and then they hosted it. That it was running on their citizen developer environment. And then those two citizen developer went on holiday. And during that holiday, the app needed a patch. But the owner of the application were on holiday. So who is responsible for that? After that, we have a huge discussion. Should the local IT host all the applications? We tried that for a little bit, 1 or 2 weeks, and then we quickly realized there are too many applications for the local IT to handle because they even don't know the application, because they haven't developed them. So it's a mix. It is something that needs to be figured out. What works for your organization and what not. But the responsibility part is important, and it belongs to Power Platform governance and therefore drives user adoption. Community. Since you're all here in a community event call webinar, I think you should know what the power of community can be, and that there are many others that you can learn from. You can ask questions, get inspiration. Community is important. Once again, if you want to spin up your own community, if you've done this before, maybe you realize that there is something like a community management, and that is necessary because the community doesn't grow out of nowhere. It's constant work, and it is basically something that you should consider, because a good community can completely work as a first level support. And I've seen this over and over again. So many of my customers have a good, thriving community. And when I ask them, do you have first level support? They say, no, it's just the community. They have this on Viva Engage or maybe in a Teams channel. Second, third level support, when some really interesting stuff is happening on the tech level, yes, they have that. But good community can function as a good first level support. And the communication part, I mentioned that earlier already. And I just stumbled upon this study recently, that it takes around 5 times at least in order to actually listen and comprehend important messages. So if you say something once, that doesn't mean that people are really getting it. You have to repeat your message. That is a study that was done for, I think, marketing or so. So how many times you have to repeat a message until the people start to thinking about it and remembering it. It's about 5 or 7 times, something like that. So communication, communication, communication. It's really important. Just like the example from my customer, they have a great governance approach, but they don't tell anyone. So that doesn't make sense. You need to tell your audience or your user base what you have and what they need to do or what they can do, who to ask, all like that. If you're interested in this study, like around the communication, I think I have it. It's from marketing. It's called frequency marketing. There's a Wikipedia blog about it. It's really interesting. It's a little bit deep at some points, but it's a nice little thing to learn about that sometimes you have to repeat. But I guess at least if you have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes you have to repeat yourself quite often. And there we have it. That's the organizational part of the governance. Both the technical and the organizational parts are equally important. And if we bring everything together, here are technical parts. We have our sheet music and the technical governance. It goes literally hand in hand. But that is the point. You need the technical parts and you need the organizational parts. Both are important because when you focus only on the tech part, I've missed the animations here. So we start on the left-hand side. When we're focusing only on the tech part, it can be that no one really wants to use it because they don't understand it. Maybe it's really inflexible and you can't adapt it to your business goals that may change over a year or in a year or in a quarter, and you will struggle to get business value. Yet the technical part can often be identical and kind of easy to implement because every administrator or security team should switch on tenant isolation for Power Platform. Everyone. Every organization should identify different environments. Dev, test, prod at least. A few things are identical and it's easy to reproduce. It's easy to read it up on the internet, on blogs or somewhere. What do I need to do from a technical point of view in order to set my technical governance up? But the organizational part is important as well. If you don't, or if you only focus on the organizational part, you may have uncontrolled chaos because you don't give guardrails, and you may have data leakages or shadow IT. But this part, the organizational part on the right-hand side, is often highly individual and complex, almost impossible to reproduce, and that is something where you really have to put in your effort and your thoughts, and you don't just give it to IT and say, please, can you switch on our governance? Thank you. That doesn't happen because then you would only focus on the tech part and you're on the left, stuck on the left side. But if you consider both organizational and technical parts, then the governance automatically creates user adoption because the user know what they need to do. They know where to go for training. They have inspiration from the community and see what can I make better in my own workday? How can I improve? What's the Power Platform? How is it for me? It's almost automatic. Then everything is perfectly balanced as all things should be. All right. I really messed up the animation here, but yeah. So when focusing on both, everything is great. By the way, there's more. The whole concept of governance, technical governance and organizational governance for adoption is actually something that is a concept on its own. And that is something that is almost identical like a COE, like the Center of Excellence. It's actually called a Center of COEN. So there is the COE, the Center of Excellence, and this one is the Center of Enablement. Here we go. They sound almost identical, but we know since we work with Microsoft that naming things can be hard. And naming things so you don't confuse them with something else is even harder. But there is this whole concept, Center of Enablement. And if you want to know more about that, if you Google that, I give you a starting point. This is an overview from Simon Owen from the UK. It's a good friend, and he blogs a lot about the Center of Enablement, of a maker movement. And this is more or less where I got the idea from the graphics, from the technical part and the organizational part. Center of Excellence, Center of Enablement. On the left-hand part, we see reusable components, vendor and ecosystem management, reporting, telemetry data, Power Platform operations, governance, compliance, security, privacy. So more the technical part. On the right-hand side, the education and tech to learn, support and coaching, communication, connecting people, so the organizational bits. So, and he always combines it with a vision and the strategy right there in the center, and that creates not only business value, but also business opportunities. So the whole concept is way deeper than I could explain in a couple of minutes. But if you really are interested in that, just check it out. Simon Owen, Center of Enablement. If you just Google that, you will find his blog. It's pretty amazing. I really like to read that. And it really gives a nice touch to, regardless from which side you come. If you come from the tech side, you will learn a lot about the right-hand part, the enablement part. And if you come from the enablement user adoption part, you will learn a lot about the technical bits and also the opportunities, what is possible, what you can do. All right. Now we almost hit the limit. I just have a little bit more left to say. So when thinking about Power Platform adoption and governance in general, and this is old principle, the Pareto principle, think about it that we have 20% tech and 80% people. Power Platform is usually around your processes, around your people, and the tech is reduced, therefore it's low code, to support your people, your processes, your things you do in your organization. So if you come from the tech side, maybe try to invest a little bit time into people, into the enablement part. And if you are from the enablement part, talk to your administrators, to your developers, and learn a little bit about the tech and tell them what you do so they can support you the best. Because from good governance comes good user adoption. And with that, I say thank you. Once again, my social contacts on the bottom there. And now we can go up to questions. And Sean, there are you somewhere, right?
Yeah. So thank you, Michael, for a great presentation. So now we'll get into questions and answered part. Should you wish to ask a question, please feel free to type in the questions box now. So just our first question there, Michael, is there any automated testing approach with low-code development with Power Platform, avoiding unwanted changes by coworker developer wannabe?
Is the question written somewhere? Can I see that in the chat? Maybe?
You won't be able to see it, but I'll read it out to you again. Sorry about that.
Just repeat the question.
Yeah, perfect. So, is there any automated testing approach with low-code development with Power Platform, avoiding unwanted changes by coworker developer wannabe?
Yes. So I believe this is about if you've developed something, a solution, app, flow, whatever you have, and then comes along a coworker and changes it, and you don't want that. So how to restrict that? Yes. I'm not sure how the automated testing part at the beginning, how that fits together. So maybe I go into the totally wrong direction, but we have different possibilities there to lock applications or solutions for other people to edit them. So you can just say, nope, you can use it, you can watch it, but not editing it. That works in solutions. And also we can put up monitoring, especially for those high critical business critical app, basically, where we put up a good monitoring approach where we see whatever happens with this application, whether it is opened, God forbid, edited or something else, then we can get a log file to see who has done what when. This is possible, yes. And we can even lock this application so no one can edit it. But it depends a little bit on the application, on the flow, on the solution. We have to look into that. But in general, yes, that's possible.
Perfect. So the next question is, do you have a guess on FTE needed for both sides?
FTE on both sides, yes. I have an estimation and a guess. Yeah, obviously it depends on your organization. If you set up a governance that also creates user adoption for 10 people, that is a different story than when you do it for 5,000 people. But if you know what you're doing, first you start with the technical bits and go through your tenant settings. And I would say that takes around you need 2 FTEs for a whole week. So 1 FTE from the customer, 1 FTE from a partner or from a consultant or whatever you have. And if they work closely together for a full week, then you can set up most of the technical part and most of the organizational part. And from there, you can start to build the center of enablement. That may take a while because you need to go through your processes, and you can expand it and extend it and extend it as you let it grow. But you should invest at least, I would guess, 1 or 2 weeks at least, I guess, if you have like a small to medium sized business, I would say, like that.
Perfect. So just the next question there is, what would you recommend if the IT is hesitant to host the solutions of citizen developers?
Yeah. First question back would be, why are they hesitant? But I've seen a lot of local ITs or IT departments who don't want to host application from citizen developer because they don't know how they work. There is no documentation, and they say, why should I do this? Because and you build it. So this is a question of responsibility. My recommendation is first to talk to them. Why are they hesitant? And I would assume that is something with documentation. Sometimes I work for some organizations as a Power Platform administrator as a service, and there I get applications that I should integrate in the IT landscape and host them. And I can only do that if I have a proper documentation. The challenge is most citizen developers haven't learned to write documentation. So that makes it tricky. So if I host it, if I'm responsible, I need to fully understand how this works. So I've seen a lot of organizations that not only trained their citizen developer in order to how to write documentation, but also they come up with a process and an application that leads the citizen developer through a questionnaire, an assessment. Now, yeah, it's an assessment application that helps transition or migrate the application or the solution from the citizen developer to the IT, where they can, like, all the questions that they have to get all the information that they need in order to host it. So if the IT is hesitant and they don't want to, then the question would be, why? What do you need? What do you need that makes you feel comfortable to host this?
Perfect. So the next question is, what guidance would you give to citizen developers to the level of complexity of business apps that they should be attempting to develop? And how should the governance work to police this?
How to level up complexity of applications is a broad question, I would say. It depends on where you start. But how the governance would fit in there, that is something when there is something like what's it called, a maker's journey would be a good term to Google, basically, because there is an idea how to structure the governance and the up-leveling of your skills, basically. That is the maker enablement journey, where you have you put all your solutions that you develop into different buckets. T-shirt sizes is quite often used, like S, M, L, XL, something like that. And the more, so from the S solutions, the S T-shirt size solutions are easy, personal productivity, maybe just a flow, maybe a single screen app or something like that. And if you increase up to L and XL, the more complex the application gets. So and the more freedom you have with, for example, custom connectors or custom code or something like that. And in order to be able to develop something more complex, okay, so raise the complexity of your applications, there is usually a training guide according to those T-shirt sizes. So as a citizen developer, you start the only allowed to develop in S size, in the smallest size of solutions. And as you learn more, you can go through a special training that puts you in the shoes of a citizen developer pro, and then you are allowed to develop in S applications and M applications, so more complex. So in an ideal world, there should be a training unit in your organization that customizes learning journeys according to complexity. And the governance approach can basically show exactly that. You have this user journey, and depending on what your solution looks like, how complex and how big it is, then you get the right resources, the right environments with the right DLPs. You get into a different security group, you have access to new things, but you have to prove that you know what you're doing in order to keep everything safe and sound. And therefore you need a training concept. But I think there's also some good community content out there about the maker enablement journey. But I don't know where I've seen that. And by the way, I want to say that for everyone who's asking questions, if I don't answer your questions in a way that you say thank you, you can always contact me afterwards on Blue Sky or LinkedIn or something like that. I'm happy to answer questions. Yeah. So, but that would be my answer to raise complexity.
Yeah, there's a good few questions in, Michael. So that's good to know that they can message you directly.
Yes.
Thanks. So just the next question there, the COE starter kit provides us with a lot of capabilities to monitor Canvas app usage. But what do you advise on monitoring model-driven apps?
Yep.
We can see they're being created, but not how many people they're shared with or how many are using them.
Yep, that's the tricky part. That is true. And the reason for that is that a model-driven app is hardly an application that you distribute to a user, and then you can count how many users are using this app. A model-driven app is more or less just a fancy editing button on Dataverse. You just have your Dataverse data model, and you work with the data, and you just put in like a mask on there. And that's a model-driven app. So this is difficult to measure. Two possibilities that I see right from scratch. The one is Purview audit reports, where you can build a really good and advanced monitoring reports, basically, where you can see if an app is opened, edited, or what basically happens. I'm thinking about model-driven app. Is that easy with model-driven apps? I'm not sure. But a possibility would be to build your own app, and then you have to be a little bit of technically advanced because you would have to include Graph API calls, basically. But then you can get information on how many people have access to a model-driven app or to this data and to these tables. That I think the answer is custom development with Power Platform, but there is no out-of-the-box solution for model-driven apps because model-driven apps are such a unique application.
Perfect. So just the next question there is, we are also facing issues with incremental builds. Most of the time it's regression issues. How do we mitigate this issue? Are there any patterns for this?
I didn't get the issue. Can you repeat that?
Yeah. We are also facing issues with the incremental builds. Most of the time it's regression issues. How do we mitigate this issue? Are there any patterns for this?
Regression issues. I'm not sure if I understand this question. But please, when the person who asked that question can please contact me later on, then I can maybe they can explain this question a little bit further. From top of my head, I don't really get it. Regression issues.
Perfect. Yeah. Will I go to the next question?
Yes. Sorry.
So yeah, yeah. There's a lot of questions in. Is there a way to restrict users to access to sources, SharePoint lists, Dataverse, so they are able to read, write, or whatever only when performing actions manually and not in automations like using Power Automate? The issue is that all is basically always production.
Yeah. We have two data sources here, SharePoint and Dataverse. In Dataverse, it's fairly easy because with custom security roles, we can really customize who is allowed to do what. And when we can switch off the automation. With SharePoint, it's a little bit more tricky because SharePoint isn't intended as a data source for applications. I know that it works fairly easily, and I've built my first applications on SharePoint basis, but SharePoint is a collaboration tool, and its intended purpose is that people can work together there. So it's really tricky and hard to restrict access from SharePoint. For example, with Dataverse, we have in every environment a dedicated Dataverse, so we can separate our database with environments. That doesn't work with SharePoint because SharePoint is on the whole tenant, rooted in the Azure subscription. So this is really tricky. We can hide SharePoint sites so user can't access them, but security and SharePoint, and this is basically what it is, security, how to prevent or how to manage the access and the possibility to edit is really tricky on SharePoint. That's why my usually recommendation is if you have sets of data that are that important that you need to restrict them, then you shouldn't use SharePoint.
Perfect. Just the next question there is, I'm the classic case of a citizen developer who created a small Canvas app that has grown, and I need to build some governance around it so it doesn't become a Frankenstein.
Yep.
What would be my first step?
Contact your local IT department and ask if they have a governance approach in place already. Because it really depends on the application, how many people are using it and how many people need to use it. You can always implement security measure on the app level, but that's not recommended because that is just like a security sticker that you put on it. That doesn't really work too well, but it should be grounded in the whole platform. And that means that you should talk with an administrator, a low-code team, if you have something, I hope you do, to ask how their governance approach looks like, so that you can think about a dedicated environment, maybe a dedicated security or user group for your users, that you can maybe automate patching and republishing. That are all things that you can think about. But you should be in contact with your local IT team or your governance team, whatever you have. Maybe you have a low-code team. If you don't, then it can be more tricky. And that would require actually more of a discussion that I'm happy to have afterwards. But your first step would be ask your local IT if they already have something in place. And if not, ask them why. The hell, why?
So this next question there is, where in an organization's Power Platform journey do you start discussing governance? Like if adoption is slow or there's a resistance to change?
Yes. I usually start the discussion in the IT department, but I wish I wouldn't. So usually it's the IT department or the CIO contacting me because they have security issues and they want to avoid data leakages and stuff like that, and we start from there. So we start on the technical bits that I've just demonstrated, and they are a little bit hesitant to dive into the organizational bits because they don't want to think about how the user acts or why the user acts in a certain way or what the processes are. They want the system to be secure. Thanks. End of discussion. And from there, it's sometimes a little bit tricky to get into the other part, to the organizational parts of the discussion. But in an ideal world, there would be a center of excellence in an organizational way, or center of enablement, something where you have people from different departments coming together, discussing how tech can support the organization in achieving the organizational goals. And for that, you need people from different parts. So I think there is no best way to start the discussion about governance, user adoption, and this low-code strategy. But maybe that's the point. Maybe every organization that uses low code should have a low code strategy. Often I start in the IT, in the technical area, which is not ideal, but they usually listen in the very beginning. Yeah, but there's no best way that I can recommend. But the important part is to think about the whole organization and many different people from different areas.
Perfect. So just next question is there, and I will wrap it up at 11, if that's okay. How easy / difficult is it to modify / customize the COE toolkit? We would like to modify this to focus on a couple of dedicated environments.
Yeah. It depends. So it is easy when you just customize flows and Dataverse tables. So what I often do is I build a monitoring or housekeeping flow on Dataverse tables, the application table, for example. If you just like put in some more columns and build a flow on that, or customize the flow, then everything is fine and everything will work as you're used to. As soon as you customize application, and regardless of model-driven applications or canvas applications, and I think there are not many canvas applications in the COE left, then things might get ugly with upgrading to the next version, because then you create unmanaged layers in a solution, and those prohibit you from upgrade the COE to the next patch. So it kind of depends. There is a good documentation where if you want to customize applications, you copy those applications into a different solution into a new one, basically. And there is import application, import from existent or something like that. So you can basically copy paste existing applications and then use those and customize those. So you leave the original solution untouched in order to not create any layers. And then the upgrade works. And then you can do basically whatever you want to do. That is, I don't know if it's easy or difficult. That depends on what you're planning to do. But if it's just flows and Dataverse tables that you want to customize, at least there is no problem there. Everything else that you want to customize, you should copy it into a different solution. And but in general, I must say that the solutions and the applications in Flow that are found in the COE are usually very complex. When you see how they are built and how they are structured, they are very, very good developers that have built those. They are quite complex and they can sometimes be tricky to understand. What I've seen so far is look at the COE and see what it does and then rebuild it yourself. It's usually more lean and faster, and it's more on point to your challenge. So yeah, and
Perfect.
I've customized a few applications and I've failed sometimes miserably. So rebuilding is usually the smarter choice.
Perfect, Michael. We might have to end it there, but is it okay for people to privately message you? If that's
Yes,
okay
absolutely.
on LinkedIn or amazing.
As I
Thank you,
said,
Michael.
if you find my email address, email is tricky. I don't read emails all too often. LinkedIn and Blue Skies are the best ways to reach me, basically.
Perfect. So on behalf of the ESBC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you again, Michael, for taking the time today to carry this webinar. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/resource center. Thanks again for you all for joining us today, and I hope you join us again soon. Take care.